So we put remote viewer with an interviewer in the laboratory. We show him our careful procedure. We go to the division director. He uses a random number generator. He goes into the safe. He pulls out an envelope. He gives it to us. We drive to the site. We're there a half hour. We come back. The guy has described it to a T. We're ecstatic. He mumbles, "You just told him in advance." I said, "But you saw our procedure." No, your division director could be inclusion too. Let's do another experiment, only I'm going to pick the site. Fine. So we do another experiment. He picks a site. We come back, another hit. We're ecstatic. He mumbles, "It's got to be a fraud, and I think I know how you did it. You had the car bugged, and we were talking about the site on the way out there. Let me pick another site, and we're not going to talk about it in the car. We're just going to drive to a site. I'm going to pick it at random while we're driving." Okay, fine. So we do that. It's a 30-minute experiment. 15 minutes into the experiment, he says, "Quick, jump in the car. We're going somewhere else." I say, "Well, wait, the experiment's not over." He says, "Yes, but you might have had somebody following me, and they've rushed back to tell them where we went, so I want to go to a second place." Meanwhile, the poor remote viewer back in the lab is saying, "Gee, it's only 15 minutes into the experiment, and they're getting their car already." Anyway, describe both sites. We're ecstatic. He's sure that it's still a fraud. We couldn't believe what he had in mind now. He says, "Well, let me think about this overnight, and I'll come back tomorrow, and I'll somehow guard against what you're doing." Well, Russell and I were commiserating with each other and say, nothing is going to change his mind. We've got to pull out our trump card. We've got to make him do it. If he does it, then he's got to deal with his own data. He can't blame us. Because we had done that a couple of times, and we were beginning to see that normal people apparently can do this. So he comes in the next day and he says, "Okay, I want to see another one. Where's the remote viewer?" And we say, "Well, today, you're the remote viewer." He says, "What do you mean? I don't believe in this stuff." He said it much more strongly than that, I got to tell you. And we said, "Well, look, at least you'll see that it's not harmful, we're not stressing the person out, etc., etc." So anyway, he agreed to do it. So this time, I was sent off to a site by the random protocol. Russell's there. He says, "Okay, close your eyes and tell me what you see with regard to where Hal is." He says, "Okay, my eyes are closed. It's dark. I see the back of my eyelids." He says, "Well, let's face it, this is a mental thing. You have to use your imagination." He says, "I've got a great imagination. I see him at a bridge over a stream. That's just my imagination." So I come back from the bridge over the stream target. We take him out there. He's absolutely flabbergasted. We're ecstatic, of course, again. We're driving back and say, "Okay, well, we nailed it this time." And he says, "It's a trick, and I know how you did it." And we said, "Well, now wait a minute. You did it. We didn't do anything." He says, "Let's do another experiment, and I'm going to foil your trick." All right. How do you want to do it? "I don't want any interviewer with me." Okay. So I put him in the experiment room, taped the door shut because he didn't trust him anymore, he trusted us. Sent out to a site. We come back, take the tape off the door, open the door. He's sitting crouched in the corner of the room with his hands over his ears. He's made a little drawing. It turns out, by the way, he really nailed the site. And we say, "Okay, well, what's this thing about sitting in the corner, and why didn't you want an interview? It's better with an interviewer." And he said, "Well, I had two hypotheses. My first hypothesis was that the interviewer, who of course knew the site, would use subtle shifts in body language that sort of guide me into what to put down. So that's why I didn't want an interviewer. My other idea was that the chair you had me sitting in had speakers in the cushions that were subliminally whispering a description of the site to me, and that's how I was getting it. So that's why I sat in the corner." So he said, "Well, okay, well, you see, that's not it. We're ecstatic. He's mumbling. It's a trick, and I just figured out how you did it." hey, all right? He said, let's do another experiment. This is what I want you to do. You go to the site. While you're at your site, you take pictures, you make tape recordings, you do all that. And when you come back, you show me that stuff before I then show you what I drew. He said, okay. This is the result of that experiment. This has got sort of pie-shaped sections which show up here, arches and so on. He turned it into cupola. He didn't actually recognize it as a playground device. But he had to admit that there were definitely correlations. And we said, well, what was this thing about us taking pictures and so on? He said, I finally figured out the only thing left was that when you left, you didn't go anywhere. You just sat in the lobby. You would come back and see what I had drawn and then take me to a site that looked like that. Okay, well. Now, about this time we had, by the way, he went back. He was convinced now. As you'll see later on, he became one of our great all-time remote viewers. Anyway, we had another problem about this time. You have to realize that the only thing secret about this program was that it was secret and who we were doing it for. But, you know, we had volunteers come in and try out experiments, and they'd go out and they would talk to people. I mean, one of my own personal problems was the intelligence people were scouring the neighborhood, asking if I ran around, if I drank a lot, and all this kind of thing to get my next level of clearance. And so all my neighbors were coming to me and saying, was that a secret project all these people have been on? Well, the only thing that was secret was it was secret. So about this time, people were beginning to speculate. So we really pressed on our sponsor at CIA and said, look, you've got to let us publish something. You know, we've done a lot of experiments here. We could publish something. Otherwise, people are going to keep this whisper campaign that's some secret project. But if we publish something in the open literature, that'll dampen that down. So they finally agreed we could do that. So we decided to write up some experiments we had done and publish them in a journal where both my colleague Russell Targ and I had published many times, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers Proceedings. We both published papers on vacuum tubes and lasers and microwave tubes and so on. So we sent the manuscript off. It went to Bob Luckey it was Director of Communications at Bell Labs. He was the editor. He comes back and says, you know, I don't know what to do. I said, why? Is everybody trashing the manuscript? He said, no, actually, almost everybody thinks it should be published. I said, well, what's your problem? Well, one really heavy hitter, a very leading light in the engineering industry, simply wrote, this is the kind of thing I wouldn't believe in even if it were true. So I don't know what to do. I'm afraid that the engineers will go up in smoke if I publish this paper. And I say, okay, well, how about this? Let us come to Bell Labs. We'll present it to your engineering staff. If they don't throw tomatoes, publish it. If they do, don't. So, okay, well, that's fair. So we went to Bell Labs. We made a big presentation. They loved it. Everyone was trying to figure out how it could possibly be in engineering terms. So we thought that sort of sewed it up. And again, he got cold feet. And so once again, we pull out our trump card. We say, okay, why don't you do some experiments here in Bell Labs? If your experiments work, publish it. He did them. They worked. And we published. But of course, there's a story that goes along with everything. This journal, this engineering journal, is routinely published, translated and published in Russia. So Russians came back on this particular journal issue and said, by the way, we're going to leave out that paper on ESP stuff. And fortunately, the proceedings of the IEEE editors said, well, no, it's you take the whole journal issue or nothing. They said, okay, well, we want to at least leave out the references to the Russian work. That's what they're really afraid of, that their own countrymen would realize they were doing research in this area. But the IEEE, they held their ground, said, nope, you got to publish the whole thing.